Yo, it's me. I haven't uploaded to my YouTube in 10 years, but I wanted to make a quick YouTube video about the disk changes, because I think they've walked into the wrong direction with this. So, what were their goals that I agreed with, and everyone agreed with, and everyone liked? They wanted to make less buttons of rotation. They did that. That's a good thing. Positive. But what they also wanted to do was they wanted to reduce the number of stacking modifiers when used to ramp for burst healing. Previously you had Schism, and you had Shadow Covenant, which is, was a lot of output tied to, short modifiers which you had to press before pressing good spells, and people rightfully so hate pressing Schism, hated pressing S-Curve. I hated that too. That's why I don't play this. But while positively they did, push them baseline, they still kept the stacking effects. And while Schism's worse, and this is technically worse because it's now 10 instead of 25 compared to live, and tied to your Bender. Bender is going to be really short this tier because of the tier set. And that's a future problem. And even Shadow Fiend is going to be like 90-second cooldown and has a 35% amp, which is stronger. But the biggest thing is that they didn't really get rid of all the stacking modifiers, and arguably has made it worse. The biggest criticism with Harsh Discipline on live is that it was something to do to press before every Radiance, but now they've just given it to you for free, and they've also made Penance considerably stronger in the rework with the tier set and just buffs to the ability. And they've also made Harsh Discipline better because you get one more bolt. And this has even more synergy, and this is, if you played Resto Druid, this is pretty similar with this Dark Indulgence talent, which every time you Mind Blast, which you're going to press every time when you press Radiance, is you're getting a 50% amp to Penance. And the biggest thing is, because of Bright Pupil, Radiance has a 15-second cooldown, so it's just up so often. And it lines up perfectly with Mindbender, which, enables another modifier with Shadow Covenant, and also enables, Abyssal Reverie, giving you 20% more and turning every spell into a shadow. And also because of miscellaneous talents, like Halo, which will have every other one, and also with this train of thought, you'll get a second Penance every time you Radiance. There's just so many synergies pushing you towards stacking your buffs and doing tons of output. And this, in effect, what current disc does right now is they just ramp to 20 every single time they have 2 Radiance charges up, and they'll just press Mindbender if you have it talented. And I think this really goes against the dev's goal of really pushing disc away from burst output. So what do I mean by this in action? I want to give an example which was provided to me by a small priest. He provided me with this screenshot, and basically what they're saying is, the base healing and Penance is 100. And you got your Schism, which is another 10, you got your Shadow Covenant for another 20, you got your Power of the Dark Star for another 50, you got 8 bolts and does this much, and with 18 atonements it does blah 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 healing. If you were instead going to use single Radiances, even without modifiers, it does basically fuck all. But even if you did a single Radiance with all the modifiers, it's doing way less because you have less atonements, which is only possible when you press Radiance twice together. And also, you just have 2 less bolts, so it literally has less of a cap to the single, like each atonement will do less because you have 2 less bolts. It's such a, the additive output of having all the atonements is less, and to each target is less because you have less bolts. So in effect, it's just doing something like, tons of healing here, but when you try to space your output and make it much more sustained, you're just doing so much less healing. So you just have even less reason to not just stack your atonements together, which was the problem originally when Disc was first came out in its redesign of Legion, is that it just stacked all of the atonements together and shit out of Penance and full heal the raid. That's what it's going back to, and what it's been since Dragonflight and Shadowlands. Has Disc ever not been like this? Yes, I would say Battle for Azeroth, and I'll give you an example. This is something like Battle for Azeroth, where if you did 2 Radiances together without Shadow Fiend or anything, you did this much healing, which was just a Schism amp and just a Penance, and you just had your other atonements, and it did this much healing. But if you spaced it out, without Schism, which every single one has Schism, so we'll probably look at this one. This is much more of an example, a positive example. There's really not that much difference in the same time frame. You could stack your 2 Radiances together, but they would do the same thing. They would just spread out, and when you were able to spread out, you could actually do meaningful sustained output. And the other thing, and I don't have a video pulled up, is that what tended to happen is that there was much more tension when you used your Radiances and when you use your output. Because if you're doing 10 atonements, that's a lot of output to do every single 20 seconds, and that pulled your mana away from your big ramps. So Disc was much less about just ramping to 20 and rolling your face on the keyboard. You actually had to make decisions with your Radiances, and that was a big deal back then. And it actually created some tension and some gameplay thought of when you were going to do things. And also, more importantly, made Disc caring much more about the sustained output, which I think is a more positive direction of what Blizzard wants. So unfortunately, I don't think they've done that with these set of reworks, because it just looks like this. Like, why would you ever care about doing this when you can just do this? And this is way more often, and you can stack, you know, this is even to include things like, you know, bloody Mindbender or any other ability like Halo, or even things like Ultimate Penances you could add to your big atonements. There's just so many more reasons just to go to 20 and just turn your brain off and just ramp to 20 every 30 seconds or every 90 seconds of Shadow Fiend. And that's a much worse to the game, because, you know, it just invalidates mechanics when you just do this much burst healing. And also, it's just way boring. Like, there's no gameplay decisions when you're just, you know, ramping to 20 and doing so much burst healing. Like, there's no, like, tension with your mana, because all your mana is just used to this thing. And why would you care about, you know, smiting in downtime, or, you know, making the choice between dumping output into your sustained or casting more flash heals, because, you know, it's just taking away from doing all this. And it just does fuck all, because these talents necessitate being balanced around. You know, you can't take Enduring Luminescence, because it just makes this talent worse. It just makes Viscerary worse, it makes HD worse, it makes Inescapable Torment worse, it makes Dark Indulgence worse, it makes everything worse. And also, if you try to use, you know, Bright People on cooldown, then, you know, it just goes back to, you know, this, like, it's just not as strong as just stacking it together. You know, 3,800 twice is less of a number than this. Whereas this, you know, 10-10, it's basically the same, or, you know, 9-9, it's basically the same output. It literally is the same. So, that's just the unfortunate thing. I think they need to go back to the drawing board and really rethink this rework. I've had some ideas of how to do it, but I think it's too out of scope of a simple rework, a much more expansion level. But really, the biggest problem, I think, is the availability of how many Radiances you have in combination with too many things that have similar cooldowns, like Mindbender for one, but, you know, when you have a 30-second cooldown Radiance and, you know, you get so much Mindbenders and stuff, like, why wouldn't you just press it like that? And I think this is the case anyway with so many modifiers, but having all the modifiers up so often and tied together with Radiances, it just incentivizes you to just stack so much output together. And I think they really should do something about this. I don't know. They could probably do something like get rid of a charge of Radiance and buff disc outputs considerably. I think that'd be a much more positive direction if discs looked like this, where, you know, you just get 12 atonements. I think there would be people would have concerns about how they can do their output, but I think they sort of, or how they can do 20-man output. But I think they've sort of done this elegantly with Overloaded with Light, where, you know, this naturally has a 4-minute cooldown which you can lower, but this is naturally, to get 20 atonements is like at least 3 minutes or so, right? I think that makes more sense to have something like this just be, you know, be your revival equivalent, where you hear 20 people, and Disc is much more about just, yeah, one Radiance charge and just smiting and actually being a DPS healer, not just, I'm a DPS healer in air quotes, but really I'm just pressing, you know, 9 flash heals in a row and then 2 Radiances and pressing 2 DPS spells. You know, I think it would make much more sense for Disc to actually, you know, care about its Shadow or Death, or have a DPS rotation at all to be a DPS healer, because just pressing Smite and Penance over and over again, while also having so much gameplay and time taken up by ramping, I think is a much worse respect, and way less interesting, I'd say. Anyway, that's just my ranty thoughts at, you know, 2 in the morning, so I might make more videos. I play Evoker now, might make more videos about that, see how I feel. Anyway, thanks, bye.